So welcome everyone. I think we have maybe three new members or two new members, I think. My name is Anita Thompson and I own Art Venture Workshops, and I'm a mobile-based art business, and I travel to libraries and rec centers, senior centers. The list seems to be growing and I'm not sad about it. But libraries are one of my favorite places to teach. So I'm happy to be here this morning to teach all of you our hourglass drawing. We're going to be using our number 2 pencil first, and we're going to be drawing lightly, as I always say. So I'm going to show you sort of how we could set up this drawing, and I'm going to go a little closer here. So for instance, I've done this obviously on a bigger piece. We're going to make a box, well, a rectangle. And so inside the rectangle is where we're going to place our hourglass. We're going to make a rectangle first, and then we're going to split it in half down the from left to right and from the top to bottom. So this is actually a technique that a lot of artists use, and it's actually, it's very helpful in looking at trying to make something look more realistic that can be a little tough. So we call that boxing in. And so that's what we're going to do today. And so I'm going to move this over to the left, and we're going to start our rectangle. So basically, it's not just any rectangle. You want to make sure that you're looking and thinking, does my rectangle need to be taller? Does it need to be wider? And so this one is, if I'm looking at this picture right here, this drawing right here, which is what we're basing it off of, we're going to start. You want to kind of guess about where everything should be as far as how wide it should be. And you can always adjust. And then you're going to go down. So remember, this rectangle should hold your hourglass. So you may have a little bit of some spillover as far as the bottom part, or you could just make a wider rectangle, because the bottom part is wider on the hourglass than the top part, but we will adjust for that. So make sure you draw your rectangle, and then we're going to start. And actually, the top part is slightly outside of our box, but that's okay. So we're going to start a little bit down from the top of our rectangle. And as I mentioned, you should be drawing lightly. I'm going to be drawing darker so you can see it. And so we're going to start with the first section here of the hourglass. So the top of it, and then we have the three little parts that are sticking up at the top, because those are the spindles that are coming from the sides. So we're going to come down a little bit from the top of our rectangle, and we're going to draw the longer part of it. And it's just slightly wider than our rectangle. Make this a little bit shorter. So as you can see, there's my rectangle, and you can see that this is a little wider than that. And then we're going to also draw the 3 parts on top of this bar that represent the spindles that are going to be happening. So coming from the left, you want to go in a little bit. So, and if you want, you can now erase the rectangle lines inside your bar so that that doesn't sort of mess you up. But you still want to maintain that rectangle for the rest of the drawing for now, so that you kind of have a reference of how straight you need to be and how long. So after erasing those lines, we're going to come back up here to the bar, and we're now going to make those parts that are kind of sticking up. So here's one. And basically, I'm just going to show this up close just so you can see what they look like a little more. So as you can see, they have sides, and they kind of are not straight sides. It's not like a box. They're kind of slanted a little bit and then with a flat top. Okay, so that's our first one. We have our middle one that is a little smaller and closer to the bar. And then finally, the last one that's a little wider, like so. And then we're going to start to create the shape, the overall shape of our spindles. But before we do that, we want to get a base on our hourglass. So we're going to come to the bottom here of our rectangle, but we're going to go up a bit, about right here, because we're going to make a cylinder. That's going to be the base of our hourglass. So again, just making sure, you know, you're drawing this lightly, because we're going to have to then draw in our glass afterward. Okay, so now back down here for the cylinder, we go up a bit from the bottom. And so that's going to look like this. So it's an oval, right? It's like a side oval. And it's slightly flat, but just a little bit of a roundness to it. And then you're going to curve. And then it's going to come out a little from the sides, right? So here's the back of your base. And then when you come to either side, you're now going to make your oval out to the rest of the bottom of the rectangle, and then meeting up on the side again on this side, but you're going to flatten out your sides rather than having them pointy. So if we were making a true oval, they would be pointy on either side, but because this is the base of our hourglass, it's going to look like this. And you can see that it's curving right here in the middle, and then it kind of curves to the back. As a matter of fact, I'm going to lift this one up just a little bit so that it's curving a little more. So it's going to look a little strange, but that is our base. And if it helps you, you can then add the curve in front like so. And then, of course, when you're ready, you can erase the lines inside and around it that were the rectangle. And then if you need to do any adjusting to your oval, we can also do that later. Or now, if you see the adjustments that need to be made, I'm going to make this just a little rounder here in the front. I'm going to make my line a little thinner in the back. So we have to remember this is a three-dimensional object. And so right now it looks a little strange, but it will be 3 dimensions or three-dimensional when we're finished with it. So we now want to go up, staying here at the base. We now want to go to the bottom here of the base, but moving upward. We're going to make a curve for the bottom of our first spindle. So sort of a kind of a smiley face, if you will. And that's going to show us that, it needs to actually, it needs to be a little bit lower. Sorry about that. Let's move that smile a little bit closer to this big line. And then once you have that, we do want to cut this in half. Remember how I said we're going to be using some lines across to sort of cut it in half. And then you're also going to go in the middle where your middle area is here and just make a line, straight line down to the base. Hold on, my line is a little wonky. Apparently I'm a little wonky this morning. Okay, so we have our small curve here on the left, and we're now going to go over to the right, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to make the next curve for the second spindle. And it should be in line with your curve over here on the left. And now we're going to create our spindles. So what we're first going to do is we're going to make straight lines down coming from the top. And if you notice, what I'm doing is I'm making them almost in line with this shape here. So let me move my line over just a little bit. And again, make sure that these are light lines because we're going to create curves for your spindles out of this. You're going to do the same on the other side. So we're basically boxing in our shape for those spindles. And now we're going to start drawing the spindles. So basically, we're going to create the first part down on the left side, and this is a curved sort of part. So basically, you want to stay within this shape that you created, the long shape. And what you do on the left side, you're also going to repeat on the right side. But what we'll do first is we'll do the one on the left because it can get confusing going back and forth. I've found that people, including myself at times, have trouble recreating the same thing on the, symmetry on the right side by going back and forth. So it's a little easier to do the first side first, I think. So now we're going to start our shape, our curves. And you now want your curves to go outside of this line. So our spindle shape comes out like this, the top. And then because it's a cylinder, we have the shape like that. And then it's going to go all the way down till about right here, where it's going to curve. And you can start to erase your regular lines that you created. In order to fill it out. Now, this part here at the bottom of the first section, you kind of want it to bell out a little bit. See how it kind of bells out, and then it gets thinner and goes straight up. So you kind of want it to be like that. And then as we're continuing on, we have another piece in between that is going to go outward a little bit and then back down to meet up with our halfway point. So it should look like that. And I'm going to go closer now so that you can see the detail. And then again, you can erase as you're going along. And then we're going to start curving outward again for the bottom portion. So going outward on both sides, getting thinner as we go down. Oh, got someone coming in. And we go down. Welcome, Patty. We're recording, so whatever you missed, you can always go back and try to catch up. So as you are going downward here, you're welcome. We're going to come here and start the next portion of the bottom, which is another curved section like this. And then we add the bottom base. Mine is a little bit higher than how I have it over here at the bottom, but I'm just going to kind of readjust it a little bit. And this is also where you can start to erase the inside lines and do some adjusting. So if it looks right to you, you can leave it where it is. If you feel like it needs to go down a little further, you can adjust. But I'm thinking that it looks pretty good on mine where I have it. And then we're going to repeat the process on the right side, just mimicking what you just drew. So when you are finished with doing some adjusting, and you may have to do more adjusting as you draw the hourglass shape in, but for now, let's go over to the right side when you're ready, and you're going to do the same thing as you did on the left. So again, making that first smaller curved section. Like so, and then your spindle will get thin and kind of curve inward as it goes down, but then it bellows out again. Like so. And I like to sort of start to erase along the way as I adjust my lines, because I feel like it can be a little confusing with all the lines. So you're welcome to do the same. It also gives you a chance to see if your bottom portion in this section looks the way you want it to, because you want it to be a little wider here where it comes out, right? It gets thinner and then it kind of bellows out a little bit. And then we add our next section, the little section here. And that's a little thinner as it stays in the shape of your line. And then we finally get to the bottom section again, where we go downward. And then we have our last section here. Remembering to curve in the front. You always want your lines in the front to curve on each section. So one here, right? Either your lines are curving instead of being straight across. The reason being is that this is a three-dimensional object and they would be in perspective. So when you look at an object, there really aren't any straight lines, even though we have to draw lines. But these lines are curved because of the way that they're appearing to us. And then you just want to make sure that both sets of your spindles are kind of lining up. I think I have to move this one down a little bit. Yep. And then you're going to make those curved lines again underneath each of the spindles. And you also want to make sure now to go back and erase your construction lines, which were the lines that you used to create, you know, sort of your box. So when you are ready for that, you can start to erase your box that you created around your hourglass, except for the line going straight down the middle. We want to use that for the final drawing part of the hourglass. And then we get to create all the lovely shading that starts to happen after we create everything inside the hourglass. Gotta give everyone some time. Okay, so now we are going to start with our hourglass. So we're going to come up to the top and we're going to come down a little bit from the top part because there is the section that is coming from the top that you'll be able to see a little bit of. Sorry for if you can hear the siren. We live right near the ambulance, so we always know when it's a busy day. Although this is the first of the day, so. Okay, so again, you want to make some of these lines, 2 lines come down a little bit from the top. They are the part that we drew over here coming down into the hourglass. And you're now going to bring it down and kind of make it sort of like a rounded box like. And you can also erase the middle line that is going through the center of it so that now it looks like this. And then we're going to create the hourglass. And the hourglass is kind of going to come from the top. And it's going to bell out toward your spindle. So we're starting off on the left. So this top part is a little bit pointy. So if you want to make both sides, it's almost like an expanded triangle, right? So it's a little bit pointy up here. And this might be easier for you to make both sides at the same time so that you can get the shape correct. So it's like kind of like a light bulb or a balloon almost, as it kind of bellows out. And then as you get towards the middle, this spindle area right here, it's going to come sort of to a point again almost, but there's a curve. So like this. I have to fix my roundness of it though, the shape. Let's see. I'm going to fix my spindle a little bit. I think my spindle is off. So this is where you'll be doing some adjusting. You'll be adjusting the shape of your hourglass. You're then going to realize certain things, like maybe your spindle is off, like I just realized. And you can make those adjustments. And then you're also going to finish up the bottom part where it starts to kind of flatten out just a little bit before you get back into the glass curving outward again. So you're repeating the same shape just below. And you want to stop before you get to the bottom because the roundness stops much sooner than you think. So it goes outward, but then it starts to go to the bottom of your base much quicker than you think. And you're also going to go past your base a little bit. Well, not past it. I should say the back of the base. And if it's helpful right now to then start to erase the line in the middle of your hourglass, you can now see where you need to do some adjusting. Yeah, I had a feeling that my right spindle was off. And I can kind of see that with my shape now of trying to make the hourglass portion. So I'm going to now adjust my glass a little first and then move my spindle a little more. So obviously the hardest part of this drawing is the drawing part, but after you've got that, I think the shading is one of the most fun parts. Okay, so I'm just moving my right spindle over a bit because I need some more room to make the glass. And I have to make the glass just a little bit wider here. So again, all these adjustments. It's kind of like a bowling pin, except a wide bowling pin. Okay. And now I'm going to adjust. I have to move over my second spindle because I drew it a little too close. Much better. Okay. Sometimes a little adjustment is necessary, and sometimes then a big adjustment is necessary. In my case, it was a bit of a big adjustment. That looks much better. Okay. So you now want to take a look at the overall positioning. And again, just adjust where you have to. Making parts wider where they need to be, more curved. And also making sure that the bottom portion of your base is still looking three-dimensional. So I'm going to make the bottom part of my base just a little bit smaller because I realized I went a little bit further out. So I'll make it just a little bit shorter. There we go. Okay. And then we're going to give our attention to the inside of our hourglass. So the inside, we're going to start in the middle here, and we're going to be drawing the section of the other spindle that's on the back, right? Because there are 3 spindles in an hourglass. So before we mess with any of the shadows, we have a portion of the spindle that's you're able to see at the top. So here we have that one section. We're going to come down from that and just make a little bit of two lines that are kind of going inward. And I'm going to go really close so you can all see. Let me adjust my paper again, move it down. So here are the two lines I'd like you to draw coming from this top section. We've got sort of another kind of knob shape here, just like at the top of our spindles, remembering that this bottom shape again is curved towards us, this part here. And then we have our spindle shape, right? And we're going to skip space, but we're going to come down here. And before we recreate that spindle area, we just want to make a line, curved line that's starting here on the left, and it's going to kind of go around in the inside of our shape, but it's going to stop about right here because we're just starting to make the inside shape of our hourglass. And then we're going to come back over to the right side and we're going to create a little bit of the same shape. So it's really just an inside line for now. We are going to make it look more shaded. But for now, it kind of looks like an avocado. And then we're going to come up here and we're going to make a line where we started that shape and a line where we started this shape as well. So it's going to kind of look like that. And then from there, we're going to create our spindle shape. So right underneath, we're going to make that spindle kind of curving and then going straight down toward this section. But we're going to stop right before. We're going to still create the other side of the spindle, like so. And we're going to add the sand part, but we're going to make the sand go up a little higher. Because it doesn't look right when it's not. Yes. Jane pointed out that it looked like a certain anatomy. And so we're going to fix that now. I'm so glad that this is not a drawing for kids because I'm so embarrassed. Oh, gosh. Thank you again, Jean, for pointing that out. Or like, what was she thinking when she was drawing this, creating this program? Oh my gosh. So this is what it's going to look like. The sand is going to be there. And our line for the spindle is just going to come right up to the sand. And I realize I have to make my hourglass a little bit wider. So I'm going to do that now too. Bottom part. There we go. And so you're probably thinking, well, what about the middle now? Well, that's where we start to have all the lovely shading. So we'll come back up to the top for now, and we're going to kind of create some shapes to help facilitate the shading. So we're going to come up to the spindle part here on the top. And we're going to create, for now, this funny shape that's going to look like a lightning bolt. But it's the outside shape of the shading. And then we're also going to make, so it's going to look like this. It's going to be a really kind of strange shape. And then it's going to come up on the side just a little bit on the right side. So that shape, this shape right here. And then we're going to come underneath it and make a line like this. So it's almost like we're making a book. It kind of looks like a book on its side, just a little bit. And now we're going to start shading on the outside. So we're going to be shading very lightly first with this pencil. And then for our final darks, we're going to be using our 6B. So we're going to start first at the top with these little spindle sections. And we're going to shade only in the middle, going down. So using obviously the side of your pencil. And then we're going to do the same on the next one, except we're shading at the top and on either side. So it should look like that. We're going to do the same on the one on the right, shading at the top and then a little bit on the sides. We are going to go back and make it even lighter on the overall sections. And then you can redefine the outside of each of those shapes by tracing around. And then we're going to move on to our bar. So basically, we're going to start from left to right. And we're going to be shading at the top on the left. And we're going to go down. And so I'm kind of shading a medium to light shade for right now. And then what's going to happen is you're going to continue the shading across the bottom of the bar until you get to the right side. And your shading's going to darken up sort of in a shaded line on the right side. So it should look like that. So again, I went from left, shaded down, and then went across the bottom and shaded a little bit, and then went up the right side of that elongated bar. We're going to do the same at the top of the bar. So basically going back to the left and going across the top with that same shading that we did at the bottom. But then you're going to go in the middle of the bar and shade like so. And you can extend some of your shading lines to be strokes, kind of individual strokes like so. And I'm going to just show this up close so you can see. Now it's not at all the darkest that we need, but we're going to go back in with our 6B and take care of all of those darker spots later on. But we want to get our very light shading and medium shading accomplished first, because it's much easier to do that than create the dark and then have to erase. So we're now going to, for now, go inside our hourglass with our shading. And then we'll go on either side for our spindles. So our hourglass, coming here in this little section, we're going to lightly shade, just like a light gray tone for that section. We're going to stay in the spindle down the center here for now. So we then want to come up to this little middle part, and we just add another little bit of a gray shading. And then we're going to come down into this spindle section, this part, and we're going to shade on the left. Again, this is all very light, and a little bit on the right. And then we're going to shade a little in the middle, but we're going to leave a little bit of white space, the white of the paper. And then I want you to trace the outside so that you're redefining it after you shaded, because it probably sort of got in, sort of got lost with the shading. And then we're going to shade down the middle very lightly in the next section until we come down to the slanted shape right here. We're going to leave that shape for right now, and we're going to tackle on the left side of the hourglass section. And so we're going to shade a very light curve going very close to the edge of the hourglass, but not to the edge. So we're creating sort of another line almost. And then we're also going to come in between where we made this sort of kind of lightning bolt shape. And we're going to come back up and we're going to shade against that lightning bolt shape. We're going to trace it around as we're shading. And then we're going to shade a little to the left. And we're going to make a line right here on the left as we're shading. And once we make that line, we can then shade underneath that line, going towards the bottom portion of the first part of the hourglass. And if you're confused, just, take a look as you're going around. And then you're going to shade in the middle of the hourglass. Now this is very light shading, and it doesn't have to be perfect right now because we're going to go back and actually make certain parts of the shading a little darker. And this is going to bring us around to the right side of the shading, where we're going to come back up top and do some very light shading where we make a kind of a pointy line. And I'm pointing my pencil to it so you can see. And we're going to do the same on the other side. And we're going to be making two highlights going down. So you can start to extend one of the lines and sort of make it pointy at the bottom. And you're going to do the same with a smaller highlight on the right that's almost up against the edge of your hourglass, but it's not. And then you want to shade around those highlights and down the right side of your hourglass. You may have to redefine at one point the outside of your hourglass by just retracing the line. And then we're going to move into the bottom half of our hourglass. And we're going to start off first with a shaded curved line that we're going to draw in on top of our spindle. But we're going to start over on the left side towards our sand, but we're going to come up from our sand. So you can see where my pencil point is pointing, and we're going to make kind of a half circle. You're going to make it through the spindle, a little bit past, and then you're going to go to the edge and make, so it's, I'm going to make this shape a little bit darker. So there's going to be this little line right there. And then we're going to go below it and we're going to make another curved line coming from the spindle. You're going to make this very light. And then you're going to go through the spindle with that curve. And you're going to do the same thing on the other side, like so. And then we're going to go into the sand and we're going to shade the sand because the sand is very light. And so basically, you're going to just kind of almost like tickle the paper with strokes of really light shading on the top. And you're kind of going and making sure that the white of the paper is showing on the edges of your shading. So when you're shading, you don't want to go to the edge of your shape of the triangle, right? And going to the right side first of the shading and also leaving the bottom of the hourglass also the white of the paper. So it's going to kind of look like this. And then you're going to continue kind of shading at the bottom. It's very light kind of strokes. I'm going to just show this really close. I want to go a little bit further toward the bottom here. So I just take my pencil and kind of make a shaded line. Like so. And then you do want to come back in on the right side and shade just a little bit darker going up the hourglass at the bottom, just like that, just a little bit. Okay. We're going to go in the rest of this bottom portion of the hourglass. And first we're going to shade in the middle here of the spindle. So we kind of have a shaded line that's happening at the top here, starting in the middle and going over to the left, like so. You can also kind of shade up top where you meet up again with the center or the pointed part of the hourglass. And then we're going to redefine this section of the hourglass. So we just shaded a little up here. Now we're going to come over here and we're going to make this line darker. So it's going to now look kind of like a balloon. We're going to go all the way up on the right side. Now we're just making that a little more outlined. And then we're going to do the same on the left side, coming from the bottom here. So the outside, kind of like a balloon shape, just make that a little bit darker for now. And then we're going to go on the left side and kind of make a shaded sort of, I don't know what you would call this shape. It's like kind of triangular. Is it not a hexagon? I'm going to show it. It's this little section right here. You're going to do it on both sides, almost like a bow tie shape, but it's shaded. Oh, I think I went too close to the camera. Whoops. There we go. These little parts right there. And we're going to come back down into our spindle. And we're going to come to the right side. So here's that line. We're going to skip some space and start shading on the right side of that spindle. And then we're also going to come down and we're going to now do some shading on the left side of the spindle very lightly. on the left of that line we drew. And then you're also going to even lighter shade to the next part of it. And you're going to redefine when you're ready. You're going to make those lines a little bit darker. So I just outlined, right, these lines. We're going to go back in later on and make those circle parts a little bit darker that are kind of interrupting the shape of that. But that's, for now, we just want to shade right where we are. And then we're going to come down to the sand on the left side. And we're going to create a little line here. And then we're going to shade inside of it right up against our sand a little bit. And we want to start to expand this shading almost to the edge of the hourglass, but not the quite. We're still leaving a white line in between. And then we're going to start shading upward toward the top or this portion of the hourglass. That was from the bottom portion near the sand. And then we go up to the left and do a little bit of a shaded curved line. And then we're going to come back to this curved line that I mentioned, and we're going to shade on top of it. And we're going to expand the shading on the bottom. And then we're going to come up to the top and sort of make like a new shaded shape and fill that in with shading. So we kind of make almost like a comma kind of shape. And then we shade in between. And then we're going to come back down on the left side toward the sand again. And we've got these little kind of shaded bumps. And it's kind of going to look a little bit like this. That's just the reflection in the glass. We're also going to come around on the right side where we have this little shaded half circle. And we're going to shade on top of it, but we're going to make it also kind of another half circle as we're shading. So we're going to kind of go like this with our small strokes. And we want to, when we're finished, take the time to then re-outline the outside shape of our hourglass. And even go to the bottom. And we're going to kind of expand a little bit on the left side of the bottom shape of the hourglass. It's not really the shape, it's going to be a shadow. shadow shape. And so now we're going to go into our base. And we want to do basically some shading in the front at the bottom and make another cylinder on the base. This is a shadow though. So this shadow is going to be a medium dark, kind of like this. And then we're also going to shade a bit underneath the left part of our spindle. So we're going to shade a little bit and also a little bit on the back to the back of it, but really light. So you see that the shading is lighter here on the back, and then it gets a little bit darker here in the front. And then we're going to continue shading lightly, very lightly, towards that curved line. And then we're going to put down our number 2 pencil, and we're going to pick up finally our 6B. So this is where it can get pretty messy because this pencil is so soft. If you don't want the sides of your fingers and your palm to be, to get messy, you can either get another piece of paper to lean on. I like to use, if you have any transfer paper, like, or even tissue paper, tracing paper is the word I'm looking for. You can do that too. I'm just going to get messy since I'm teaching and I want you to be able to see the whole drawing as I'm doing it. I'm going to lift up a little bit here. But this is our final step in making all the darks nice and dark. So we're going to start up right at the top, and we're going to be redefining everything. So first we're going to trace around every part of our drawing. So that means all the little sections, the bar, we are redrawing it darker with our 6B. We're going to go into our spindles, so all of it. The outside of all of our shapes, we want to now darken up. This is also a good chance right now to redefine your shapes. If something needs a little more of a curve or to even be a little straighter, this is where you want to make those adjustments. You also want to redefine your base too by tracing around it. And your hourglass. So everything should have a darker line around it. And we're going to start shading. So we are going to come to the left side of our bar and we're going to give it a nice dark shading on the left, right on top of where you've already shaded. So this shading should be like a medium dark. So we don't want it black, but we want it really dark gray. And you're going to continue shading across the top of your bar all the way across to the right side. And you're also going to shade on that right side darker. And you're going to get to the bottom and you're going to do the same thing. You're kind of tracing around with shading. And it should be like a very dark gray. And then you're going to go in the middle and you're going to shade incredibly dark gray. So you can see that here in the middle, it's going to be kind of the darkest we've had. And then you're going to take some strokes of shading and you're going to extend it outward on the left and the right into the white space. So if you look, I'm kind of taking my pencil and creating lighter strokes that go out into the white space. What that's going to do is it's going to give your eye or sort of make your eye look like, or I'm sorry, I'm saying it wrong. What it's going to do is it's going to make it look like that it's shaded and it's kind of a little bit gradual on either side. That's what I was trying to say. I don't know why I kept bringing the eye into it. I think I was trying to say something and I couldn't quite get to what I was trying to say. And so continuing now, we're going to now go into the spindles and basically shading in the middle on the top little portion. And then at the bottom, making it a little bit darker. We're going to stick on the left side first. With the next section of the spindle, we're going to leave the right side of the spindle, sort of like some space. the white space, and you're going to shade downward into the spindle, but you're leaving, again, sort of a white ring around the outside of both sides of the spindle. So it's going to kind of look like this. And we're going to go back and make it even darker in sections. But for now, we kind of want to get, the parts that we want shaded. So we're going to stick mostly in the middle with our shading, all going down each portion of the spindle. So here's that other little section, and we're going to do the same down the long part. And don't worry that your shading is not even yet. We are going to get to that and make it a little more even. But for now, we just want to kind of shade down the middle of that whole spindle. And you're going to repeat that process down the right side of the spindle. Same idea, kind of shading in the middle of each section and leaving both sides of the spindle sections the white of the paper. So it's almost like you're doing this continual shading, but when you get to each section, you shade in the middle. You do want to shade underneath each of the spindles, making the shadow a little bit of a darker, sort of a darker shaded area that extends on either side of the spindle. So see how I'm making those lines a little bit wider. You're going to do the same thing under the hourglass, except you're going to go a little darker in circles on the left side. I should say on the base, underneath the hourglass, on the base. You're also going to come now to the base and shade on the left corner of the base. And you're going to go across the top that's in front of us and shade the bottom of the base until you get to the right side. And you shade that kind of round, almost like rounding a corner on the right side. And when you're finished with that, you're going to shade on the kind of smiley part that we created in the front. And we're going to add one more section to the bottom of the base where we're going to add some more shading. And we're actually going to extend or make a little bit wider the front part of the base. And we're going to start on the left side and curve in front of us. So it's going to be a little wider right where the base is meeting in the middle. And then, so it's going to kind of look like this. You're going to kind of make a shaded curved line. That's going to be your new line for your base because we want that one line that we created to be part of the shading, because we're then going to add 3 shaded strokes starting from this line. So what I mean is, here's one, and they're kind of like, I hate to say again, lightning bolts, like shaded parts that are diagonally shaded to the end of your base. And then you can shade a little bit on top of them as it meets up with the thicker black line in front of you. Now you may have to redefine your base by sort of making the outside line a little bit more darker. And we're going to start adding the finishing dark touches to the rest of the spindles. And these are really just going to be sort of dark pockets of shading on top of what we've already shaded. So we're going to make on top of the spindle on the left, we're going to add a little bit darker shading in this little section here at the top. And then we're going to start to go down the spindle and we're going to shade a little bit darker, but then we kind of get just a little bit lighter toward the bottom. So here's what I mean. We kind of shade a little bit on top. A lot of this is just shading on top to make it more of a gradient. And I'm going to go really close now so you can see that shading. So you can see here, I concentrated my shading a little bit to make it darker and gradual. When I get into the next little knobby section, it's just a little bit of darker shading, but this time on the right side. And then as we go into the bottom spindle, or this longer spindle, I do some short strokes of shading on top of the top section, but then it gets a little darker here in the middle. So I start to press my pencil into the paper a little bit darker as I'm shading. And as I go toward the bottom of the longer part of the spindle. And then the other 2 sections are fine the way they are as far as the shading. And then we're going to go into the actual hourglass and we're going to darken up around the left side of our shading. And we're going to add sections of darkness on top of what we already have here. So here's a darker section right here. And that's going to go toward the end or bottom of that first sort of portion of the hourglass. And then that's going to go around to the right side of it using darker shading. And go up a little bit to the right. And we're going to go into sort of this sort of rectangular section and add some shading in the middle. And then underneath it. Now this is not your darkest shading. This is kind of like a medium dark. And we're going to add some dark shading on the top right, on top of the lighter shading we did. And then we're going to go into, when we're done, we're going to go into the bottom portion, but I'll give you some time to do that. I'm going to fix some of my shading down here. So we're going to add some dark shading on top of this line. We're going to make this line almost black at the top with our shading. Then we add a little bit on the left side, kind of like a dark gray line. So this part here. We're going to now shade on the right side. So in this spot that we left white, we're now going to shade a light to medium gray around the right side on the inside of our hourglass. And then we're going to also make a little darker our shading on our spindle that's in the middle here. We're going to go on either side and shade next to the dark line that defines it. And then we're just going to add some really light strokes in the white part on the left side of the hourglass in the bottom, just a little bit. And then we're finally going to just add some darker shading in the middle on top of our shading that we've already done on the spindle on the right. We're kind of doing the thing where we kind of travel down and we shade a little darker in the middle as we go down. And you can start to even out your shading by concentrating very slowly on each section until it looks more even. And you're just going to go straight down, sort of the middle of each section, and just darken it just a little bit. And you can redefine any sections that you want by, if you want to re-outline certain sections, you can do that now. So I'm going to remove my spotlight and stop the recording.